job and saved money. Seriously, I did not go out to parties, vacation, or even replace my car. I set a goal to buy a house before I reached 30, and I succeeded. Okay, sort of. That's where the actual narrative begins. When I was 28, my mother called me at lunch and offered an idea. I already knew what it meant. She always called it a proposal when she wanted anything, but she attempted to make it seem like it would also benefit me. This time the proposal was that she, my stepfather Henry and Jacob, had discovered a fantastic home but couldn't afford it without assistance. "It's big enough for everyone," she remarked, as if we were the perfect family show. "We can grow stronger as a family here. You'll finally have a place to work from home." She also mentioned that I wouldn't have to pay rent anymore. I'm not going to lie, the mansion was stunning. 2 stories, a wide yard, and even a tiny sunroom where I imagined putting books and plants. But of course, I would bear the majority of the expenses. They said it was a wonderful investment for me. They promised to take care of the bills and meals, while I would only pay the mortgage. Jacob would get a job soon and start assisting, my mother added. Henry had some job concerns, but these were being addressed. Everything felt questionable, but I was tired of paying rent. To be honest, I wanted to believe that my family could finally function together. So I agreed. I added my name to the mortgage, paid the down payment with my own money, and moved in with them. And for a brief while, everything seemed fine. We ate together. Jacob acted politely. My mother even appeared proud of me. That probably gave me hope. I had no idea I was falling for a phony dream. The first indication that something was wrong occurred roughly 6 months later. Jacob still had no employment. He claimed he was looking, but in reality, he had been staying up all night playing video games and blaming the system. Henry left the house early every morning, talking about a job, but no money ever arrived. Bills were not being paid. There was less food at home. When I mentioned it, my mother would tilt her head and remark, "Well, Edward, you have a great job. You can take care of it, right?" I tried to remain cool. I kept thinking it was only for now. That they will find employment shortly. I had to wait a little longer. However, I began to feel more like a cash machine with a bed than a person who owned the house. Worse, they pretended to own the house. Jacob was frequently hosting gatherings. Henry replaced the locks without telling me. My mother rearranged things in my office while I was away for business, transforming it into her reading nook. I almost lost control when I watched her peruse my letters to see if there was anything important. Still, I kept quiet. I'd started seeing a therapist, and they advised me to establish clear boundaries. So, I did. I printed out a document outlining our spending, highlighting what I paid for, and what they did not. I urged them to begin assisting. Not a lot, just a few hundred every month. They acted as if I had asked for something excessive. "We're your family," my mother explained, as if that meant they didn't have to pay anything. "I know," I said. "That's exactly why I let it go on for this long." Jacob rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath that I cared too much about money. Henry did not even come over to join the conversation. After that, the mood changed. Awkward, frigid, and filled with hushed tension. Jacob ceased saying anything unless his internet was down. My mother continued to cook, but there was no longer enough food for me. When I left, they started having private conversations, and when I returned, the house felt different. Furniture in new locations. Tasks were reassigned. New rules, such as no shoes in the lounge, seemed to apply just to me. The true sting struck in November. I had been swamped with work and was looking forward to the holidays. My work had been exhausting, and all I wanted for Christmas was calm. I had even purchased a tree, some basic lights, and a wreath for the entrance. I set everything up on Saturday morning while they were gone. That evening they came home and glanced around the living room as if I had committed a crime. "Why didn't you check with us first?" my mother inquired, arms folded, and stared at the tree as if it had personally insulted her. "I thought we were celebrating together," I explained, perplexed. "We chose not to celebrate Christmas this year," Jacob said. "It's a waste of cash." "We made that decision," Mom explained. "Nobody mentioned it to me," I replied. "Well, maybe if you were here more often," she replied, "you'd be aware of what's going on." A deep, hollow silence enveloped my chest. I just stood there, watching the twinkling lights behind her. The way she spoke made me feel out of place, like if my exhilaration had intruded and damaged their space. But I kept it inside. I removed the decorations, took down the wreath, and told myself it wasn't worth fighting over. I even convinced myself that maybe next year will be better. Then this week arrived. When I arrived home after a work trip, I found the living room decorated with lights, stockings on the mantel, and holiday music playing in the background. They were decorating the tree and laughing together. I stopped at the doorway for a second, wondering if it was a surprise for me. But I heard my mother say, "It's so peaceful not having Edward here to ruin everything." I froze. I did not know what to say. When I entered the room, the laughter stopped. "Oh," my mother responded without emotion. "You're back earlier than we thought." "I guess I missed the message about not doing Christmas again," I answered, maintaining my voice level. She did not blink. She looked directly at me and said, "We're not including you in Christmas this year." Just like that. I'm not sure what she wanted me to do: yell, cry, or ask to participate. I did not accomplish anything. I merely nodded, walked into the kitchen, took out my laptop, and entered into my mortgage account, while they continued to hang decorations on the tree that I was not allowed to touch. I selected the option to remove myself as a co-borrower, and when the machine asked if I was sure, I clicked yes without thinking twice. However, that was not the end of the chapter. Because once they realized what I had done and what it signified, the faux friendliness vanished quickly. That's when everything truly got out of control. 3 days later, I was eating lunch in my office when my phone started vibrating non-stop. First, Mom sent a message. "Edward, what did you do with the mortgage?" Another one in full caps. "Stop being ridiculous. This isn't funny." I didn't answer immediately. I simply stared at the screen. The words seemed hazy, like if my head was dragging. I expected them to catch on eventually, but not this quickly. I assumed I would have at least a couple more days. To be honest, I didn't expect them to care that much. It turns out they did. My mother tried calling. I let it ring. She called again. I also overlooked that. She eventually left a voicemail. I wasn't sure what to expect. Perhaps an apology. Nope. "Edward, this is cruel. The house is supposed to belong to all of us. It's not something you can use to hurt us. I didn't raise you to be this way. Call me back." The concluding line, "I didn't raise you to be this way," made me laugh out loud. The irony could have spread like butter. When I walked inside that night, it felt unusually still, far too silent. Usually Jacob would be ranting at his console while Henry would be faking repairs elsewhere. What about now? Just silent. The quiet hum of the fridge filled the air, as did the smell of charred food from the kitchen. Most likely one of Henry's bizarre supper preparations gone awry. I strolled in as usual, set my keys on the shelf, and kicked off my sneakers. I hadn't expected an attack in the living room, but all three of them, Mom, Henry, and Jacob, were lined up on the couch like a panel of judges. "You have to undo what you did," Mom murmured, her gaze avoiding mine. "Hey there, Mom. It's great to be back," I said, tossing my laptop case beside the steps. "Quit pretending," Jacob yelled. "You messed with the property stuff. That's against the law." I raised an eyebrow. "Against the law? You mean changing ownership of the place I paid for?" "It doesn't only belong to you," Mom snarled. "We've stayed here. We made it our home." "You've been living here rent-free," I said back. "That's not the same thing." Henry eventually spoke quietly. "You're doing the wrong thing, kid." "I'm not your child," I said without thinking. Silence struck the room like a punch. That remark landed hard. Henry averted his gaze, and something in Mom's face shifted. Not agony, not sorrow, just blank, as if she had been wearing that artificial look for so long that she had forgotten it was fake. "We gave you," she began, her voice quiet. Something inside me sprang open. "Oh, you mean the part where you duped me into paying for your house by making me the family's target? Or how about the time you hosted a party but didn't invite me, despite the fact that I live here? What memory are we talking about?" "Stop being over the top," she mumbled as usual. As if that sentence could remove any harsh reality. I walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and grabbed some cold water. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from a different type of energy. It was sharp, controlled, and decisive. Something had changed within me that could not be undone. You know? I murmured, leaning on the counter. I used to think it was me. That if I worked harder, paid more, kept quiet, I'd finally belong here. Edward, Mom said, her voice too sweet and phony. But now I understand, I interrupted her. You don't want a son. You want someone to pay the bills and never ask questions. That's not who I am anymore. I sipped and glanced at each of them. Jacob's face was flushed, his leg jumping like a scared child. Henry seemed completely blank, like if he had given up years ago. And Mom. She appeared to be about to say something harsh, but couldn't find the words. So I completed it for her. I already talked to a lawyer, I replied. Technically you're just residents here, but since there's no lease agreement you've got 30 days to leave. Not one word. Only quietness. You're really kicking out your own mother? She inquired, her voice wavering slightly. After all I've done for you? You stopped acting like a parent the second you turned me into your bank account. The hush in the room was heavy. Even the couch appeared to hold its breath. Then Jacob sprang up quickly, hitting the table with his knee. This is nuts. You can't do this. I can, I answered calmly. And I'm going to. I turned and went upstairs, prepared to lock my door and let them deal with it. But as I got to the top, I heard her voice again. You think you're the good guy, she cried. But this won't be forgotten. Family remembers. I paused for a second, turning back enough for her to hear but not see me. Good, I said. I hope you remember every bit of it. I shut my door and sat at my desk, inhaling carefully. The silence was not serene. It seemed tight, like the sky before a storm. Because I knew this wasn't the end, and they were going to fight even harder than before. The next day began with an uncomfortable silence. It felt weird, not peaceful, more like the unsettling silence that lingers after a major battle, where even minor noises seem louder than usual. I could hear someone moving downstairs, clinking plates slightly too loudly, as if they were attempting to be passive-aggressive over breakfast. I didn't bother going downstairs. I was not prepared for another round, and I knew they weren't either. Not yet. However, the silence was only a prelude to the main action. By that evening, the real pushback had started. My mother started it by putting a piece of paper under my bedroom door. Yes, a genuine handwritten letter in immaculate script. 3 whole pages written on her fancy note card, which she usually saved for birthdays. The first line read, I'm speaking as a mother who deeply cares about her son, not someone trying to control him. Sure. The entire letter was a huge guilt trap. She wrote about what she had given up for me. She worked 2 jobs when my father walked out. How she never complained. She did, however. She even mentioned how I used to cry whenever I scraped my knee, and how she was always there to soothe me. Then came the emotional weight. She described how heartbreaking it was to see the family break down, regarding how my behavior was tearing us apart, about how money had turned me cold and distant. The last line, I just want my son back. Please don't go through with this. I finished reading with a tight feeling in my chest, not because I believed any of it, but because a part of me still wishes I could. That was always the way it was with my mother. She did not raise me with kindness. She used pressure to raise me. And that type of upbringing is difficult to shake. I did not respond. The next morning, things worsened. Henry noticed me walking out of my room and stood in the corridor like a cheap security guard. You know, he remarked, arms folded. This house doesn't just belong to you. We've done a lot around here. I blinked at him. You changed a bulb last month. He did not like that. His jaw stiffened. This isn't how families act. No, I answered, walking past him. But that's exactly how a landlord deals with non-payers. Later that day, I realized the thermostat had been locked. My mother abruptly declared that the upstairs restroom was off limits. The laundry times were rearranged at random without my knowledge. Childish. Immature. But it did not end there. That night, I discovered Jacob sitting in my office, using my computer. He was sitting in my chair, browsing through my open tabs as if everything was normal. What are you doing? I inquired, lowering my tone. He looked up slowly as though I was upsetting him. Chill out, he said. I'm just looking at something. You always act like everything is yours. It is mine, I said firmly. Yeah, he replied as he stood up, his voice falling. Maybe it's time you stopped pretending you're above everyone. You're not better than us, Edward. I didn't respond. Then he added, one day you're going to be the one begging for support, and when that day comes, I hope we remind you of this. It was almost comical that I needed their assistance. I wanted to laugh. But instead, I simply closed the door and turned the lock. That night I began putting a chair under the doorway when I went to bed. I wish I could say it was simply nervousness, but the next morning, I discovered scratch marks on the doorframe near the lock, as if someone had attempted to force it open. That's when I stopped trying to be pleasant. I started keeping records, I took pictures, saved messages. I set up a hallway camera directed directly at my door. I printed the state's tenant statutes and marked every provision that enabled me to legally evict them. And I began preparing, not simply to get them out, but to leave myself. Because even if they were gone, the home would remain heavy. A place full of old battles and tensions that I could not forget. 2 days later, the finish line was crossed. I got home from work, walked into the kitchen, and froze. They had gone into my refrigerator. Everything on the shelf where I stored my personal food, my leftovers, yogurt, Thai recipes I enjoyed, had been spilled. Everything is in the trash. The shelf was empty. A note was affixed to the refrigerator door. One word. Community. No name. There's no explanation. Just that. I did not shout. I did not stomp around the house yelling. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, typed out a proper eviction notice, printed a physical copy, and slipped it under the door to the living room, where they were watching some rubbish TV show. Roughly. 5 minutes later I heard Jacob exclaim, "What the heck is this?" I didn't answer him that night, but I knew they would show up eventually. They didn't come alone. That is when the next stage of their story began. This time, they brought in the entire family. The night I handed them the official eviction notice, I felt peace was out of reach. They were not about to leave quietly. That was just not their style. What surprised me was how much effort they put into spinning the story. It began with Aunt Linda. She called me the next morning, her voice full of artificial friendliness, as if she'd already chosen her team but was pretending not to. "Edward, honey, I heard there's been some trouble at home. Your mom's really hurting," she told him. "I heard you're throwing them out." I exhaled. "Linda, they've lived in my house without paying a single dollar for nearly 4 years. They haven't helped with anything. I'm simply asking them to finally step up." She hesitated and said, "I just don't think that's very Christian of you, especially during the holidays." And there it was, the guilt strategy. The normal family technique is to make me feel like the evil guy while entirely rewriting what's going on. Over the next few days, I received messages from 3 cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. 2 people pretended to be casually checking in. Someone sent me a Bible quotation with a sardonic twist. Even my grandmother, who hadn't been fully cognizant for the previous 2 Thanksgiving feasts, managed to leave a voice message that said, "Edward, don't hurt your poor mom like this, You'd think I'd be angry. Instead, I felt clear-headed, as if a veil had cleared and everything made sense. This was the game, the structure, an emotional swindle in which my mother was the boss and fed her version of reality to everyone else. And I was finished playing along. I stopped responding to texts. I went to work, came home, took notes on what had transpired, and waited. The 30 days were passing away, and each week the house became colder, both in feel and temperature. Mom abruptly forgot to use the heat. Jacob hammered on the doors. Henry sulked around. The entire atmosphere was filled with unspoken anxiety. I kept out of it. I kept to myself. I slept with my door locked. I made my own food. Waited. 3 days before the deadline, I prepared a Facebook post that was calm, direct, and honest. No name calling. There was no shouting. "Hello everyone. I'd like to clear up some confusion. Years ago I consented to live with my mother, stepfather, and brother. I made the entire down payment on the home, and have subsequently paid 95% of the total costs. Despite multiple attempts to establish shared accountability, I've been treated with manipulation and quiet harassment. After being excluded from family functions within the home I paid for, and having my boundaries repeatedly violated, I made the legal decision to serve them a notice to vacate. This was not done for retribution, but because I value my tranquility. I wish them no harm, but I will no longer risk my sanity to defend someone else's idea of family. Then I logged out. That post did more than just cease the guilt tripping. It absolutely shut it down. A few people attempted to keep the drama going, but most gave up after I presented substantial evidence, messages, emails, and photos of what had been broken. I did not insult anyone. I did not reveal all the details. I did not need to. The reality was more than sufficient. When the day came for them to leave, I didn't grin, did not gloat, didn't say anything. A friend brought over his pickup, and I used it to transport their belongings, what little was worth taking, to the front yard. I boxed everything all up on my own, tagged everything, and kept it calm. Jacob stepped outside and shouted something about me betraying the family, but I did not respond. Henry remained silent, his gaze fixed downward. Mom glanced at me, not with wrath or grief. She looked surprised, as if she